Please tell me if I'm audible, more or less. Comprehensible, maybe? Yes, you can hear. Okay, great. It's a good start to be audible. I'm very honored to be here. I really am. And I'm very grateful to the leadership of the museum. Director General has just been up here. To Firoza Godrej, to the staff, including Vaidehi, whose last name I only learned yesterday, so you'll forgive me for referring to it the first time, and several wonderful younger colleagues who have curated my way around this garden and to this place. So I'm here safe and sound. So I'm grateful to all of them at the museum. And I must name, of course, also my dear and old friend Meenal Shirsagar, who opened this opportunity, and others, however reluctantly, carried the ball. So I'm here now. And I must also invoke her late husband, Eknath Shirsagar, whom many of you know, who was like an elder brother, mentor, friend to me and numerous others, all of whom treasure his memory in different ways. And finally, I must thank Manjari Kamat. Where is Manjari? Somewhere. My visual targeting is a little for your part in enabling this event. There are surely others who are either behind the scenes or so high up in the stratosphere that I don't know who they are, but I'm grateful to all of them. And before I launch into my talk, I must point out for those who do not know that I spent some very happy years very nearby in Elphinstone College in a kind of Neolithic or Pleistocene era long ago. But museum was very much there. Elphinstone was very much there. And many other august institutions all around us, the Institute of Science, plus the big police headquarters not very far away. Many things were here then as they are now. So, and a museum always was a very big presence here, though I have to say as a student in first year arts and inter arts in the mid 60s, I had some more trivial interests in life, mostly time passing here and there, so I hardly took advantage of anything, either in the curriculum or outside the curriculum, but somehow education happened osmotically and I kept on becoming further educated until there was no room for further education. So then I had to get some employment, which I have done, and I've been very, very lucky, so I'm very glad to be back. Mumbai is a place I hold dear. I spent my first 18 years non-stop, not only in Mumbai, but more or less within 1 kilometer of here with excursions to distant places like Malabar Hill or Cuff Parade. Beyond that was a bigger task. Still, I like to think I have some early investment in the city. So, before I go into the content of my talk, I must apologize for two things which might disappoint you. One is that I, unfortunately, am a talking head and have no visual slides or PowerPoint displays for you. As my good friend Rashmi knows, people have to put up just with mic and some bhashan. But I hope it will help you imagine some things which you can then imagine being behind here, click, click. But that's one apology. Secondly, and a little more seriously, I am primarily a scholar of modern India and of globalization, and thus my direct relevance to a project involving ancient worlds is at best indirect. Still, I have been interested in material objects, museums, transnational cultural flows, and pedagogies through objects for some time. I hope the links between these interests and ancient Indian art, as well as the contents of this gallery, will become a little more further illuminated from whatever angle I have to bring. So, a word about Herodotus. Again, I'm not a reader of Greek, so I have worked with translations, but Herodotus was part of my graduate education at the University of Chicago, which is one of the last places where they actually believed in reading books, and reading high-powered books from older times. So they had no problem, and with newer books, they always felt this or that book is not yet ready. It's like wine. If it's not been there for several thousand years, who knows the value? Herodotus and Thucydides were the two great, like Muhammad Ali and some Liston or something, fighting it out. So this is not a very glamorous fight for the larger crowd, but at the university, it got very high stakes. Some people liked Thucydides, some professors. I didn't know anything about either, needless to say. And some, like my mentors in the strange department I was in, liked Herodotus. So I read Herodotus in translation, and these translations were carefully picked, so, they were good quality for that time, and perhaps even today. And what I discovered was that I had stumbled into the father of anthropology. Herodotus, as a Greek, was looking around the world surrounding him. Egypt, Persia, Arabia, and Scythia. These were the places that surrounded his Greek view. So it was a remarkable effort by a Greek scholar, writer, thinker to think about that outside world. So it introduced me in a very strange way to what anthropology is. And that book is still, I would say, remarkably worth reading, even if you're not particularly interested in ancient Greece, because it's a struggle to go outside his cultural boundaries and say, what are the Egyptians doing? What are their funeral ceremonies? How do they handle birth and death? Same with Persia, which was, of course, at that time, Greece was the great interlocutor of Persia. It was not like the US and Iran. Greece and Persia were right on top of each other the whole time, worried about each other, imitating each other, competing with each other. So Persia, he had a lot to say about. And then Scythia was slightly, for him, what was a kind of barbarian world. It was not at the level of Egypt, Greece, and Persia, but it was a very important counterpoint, and he was very respectful. So this is what we learned from him, that you don't have to rank these places, He was truly interested in difference in the ancient world surrounding him, and difference from Greece. So I leave it there to say that I have no major, deep readings of Herodotus or anything, but just to say that is where I got an idea of what was happening in the ancient world. And in that context, we also read Plato, some Aristotle, all sampling, of course. But we got some feeling for ancient Greece, which was fairly substantial, because my professors had a deep commitment to the idea that the significant history of the West began there. That there were things before on the side, etc., but that's where it began. Later we realized that it was the modern world that looked back and made the Greeks the founders, but that's another story. There is a line of thought, and they were very committed to it. And so there was a kind of story they told that went from the Greeks to, of course, the Romans, then to the slight darkness of the medieval period, then the sunlight of the Renaissance. It's a well-known story, but it can be told very well or very badly. And they try to do it very seriously. So somehow this interest that was sparked in me by Herodotus did not lead me to become a scholar of the classics. I was very committed already to anthropology, to the study of modern India, to the contemporary world, but I was glad to be enriched by this other set of books and texts and ideas. So I want to shift from that to something coming closer to what I may have to offer, which may not be over familiar, I hope, to all of you, but it will be known to some of you, that I became interested in the 80s in the subject of objects, material things. And I was lucky to get together with a group of colleagues and edit a book called The Social Life of Things. And several people in that volume did excellent papers on things like rugs from Afghanistan being sold in Europe, or medieval relics, bodily relics that became part of a trade under the Catholic world. Or my dear late friend Chris Bailey did a beautiful thing on Gandhi, Khadi, and so on in the modern world. So all this was about material things and how they move around. And what I did in a long introduction, which is still available for those who might want to look for it or find it, is to try and connect the movement of objects to the movement of people and of ideas and so on. So long before globalization or my interest in it, I saw that objects move around. And my co-authors and I got the idea that objects have biographies, and you might say things have lives. So that was our high funda, that whether it's this thing or something in the gallery, there is a before and after. It is not descended from heaven. Nothing, however humble or however luxurious or extraordinary, is a kind of swayambhu object. It does not fall from the sky. It has a life. You might say it has a biography. It is born somewhere, it moves, it is forgotten, it's rediscovered. And I urge you to think about anything you can see around you. This chair, for example, and say, is that true? Well, it's true. It began somewhere generically as some kind of tree. The tree becomes that tree. That tree is processed in a certain way, is shaped this way, it comes here. Then it's owned by the museum and may tomorrow get decrepit, be thrown away. It has a life. In other words, it has a story, like all of us. And it is also true to just remind us that this is not only for humble objects, everything in this museum, for example. You can do that if you want. Now, people do it sometimes and they don't do it sometimes. These days, it's called provenience research and all that. But it's not done that much. Mostly people want to interpret the object as it were right there. And that's very hard, very challenging for curators, very challenging for interpreters. But if they did this other thing, it becomes a little easier in my opinion, which is look at the life of the object or the thing. So in that introduction, I try to address a number of things. For example, I say these objects, whether they are carpets or statues or relics or textiles or Wedgwood china, have you might say, a path, a kind of intended path. Here it is in the factory, here it is in the distributor, here it is in the market, here is the consumer. But there are also diversions. People steal these things, people hijack these things. People move these things into the wrong place, or they take them out of circulation and put them in a collection at home, say, no more moving. Furthermore, they say, no more showing. That's a beautiful thing, that I have this extraordinary thing whose extraordinary is such that nobody can see it. But the whole point was seeing. So it's been, you might say, diverted. I wouldn't say hijacked, but diverted. And every object we know has paths, like BST route, and then diversions, because something happened. Somebody picked it out, somebody moved it away, and those are equally worth studying. What gets diverted, and it may be that when you encounter an object during its life, including the finest art objects, you have caught it at a certain moment in its journey, which may have gone down a side road, not in the main road. So the whole repatriation debate and all is which is the main road and which is the side road, if I may put it colloquially. And of course, there are huge scholarly discussions about repatriation, restitution, colonialism, all there. But I think the fundamental issue is, which is the legitimate path? And at one point has somebody hijacked either the vehicle or the object, and who has the right to decide that this is a diversion, that is the correct path, and so on. So it's a rather deep issue, actually, when you think about it, although it may look clear. The issue of the marbles in the British Museum, Greece, it looks open and shut. Just give it back, guys. Well, yeah, maybe, but then when you extend it to 500 other things, most of us are ready to give up most of what we have. For sure, because it has some history, it began somewhere, even our humble things. So it's not so straightforward. And this business of the circulation of objects and all has two other aspects. Again, it's a long treatment that I have about it in my ancient history, my own ancient history. But it involves circulation, expertise, connoisseurship. So when you come to high-end luxury or intellectually intensive objects like what's here, connoisseurship is involved, expertise is involved, discrimination is involved. So there is a big distance between, let's say, salt or sugar. They're also commodities, they also move, they also have a life, and unique objects here. So there are what I call commodities, and then there are singularities. Only one. The only trouble is singularities also get commoditized. So then we have limited edition, 100 books. So is that commodity? Is that singularity? So there are again some subtle issues. And if some artwork here is reproduced holographically in a poster, in this and that, and then becomes a stock photograph or goes to Getty Museum, who is to say where is the original, where is the replica, was it commoditized, is it derivative? I mean, these are not questions that easily answer themselves, nor is there a generic answer. So I want to transition from this to another idea, which is a more recent idea in the human sciences, social sciences, critical sciences, again, which many of you will know, and I apologize if I'm bringing coals to Newcastle, that the line between humans and objects is very fluid. So this is a new thing of the last, let's say, 20 years. And lots of people have come onto that bandwagon. I was, as it were, an early but very simple-minded investor saying, objects have lives. But since then, life has become capital L. And that's a very rich development later than my early start in the subject. So I'm also keeping up and trying to understand. But the main lesson is, don't think there is something unique about us. Objects also move. So if this microphone falls down, can I say totally it's because I pushed it? Maybe there was some tendency there. We sometimes call those tendencies gravity, but is gravity just an object thing? There are pulls, there are pushes, plants grow. I mean, where's the growth coming from? Because I'm supervising it? No, something is going on. So today, it is become more or less, I would say, accepted that human beings are a particular form of energy, body, appetite, desire, biography, and, shall we say, technological infrastructure. What is inside us? Why does my hand rise like this? It's a machine issue. So there is one literature about machines, which is very elaborate. And by the way, the latest child of that literature is artificial intelligence. Computer is there, it can be just like me, I can be just like it. We know it's the panic of the times. But today I'm not, you'll be happy to know, not going into that panic, but into the other department, which is, let's say, nature, the rest of nature. From plants, sticks, stones, to planets, stars, clouds, rain, all of them are agentive. So those of you who read, for example, the late great Buddhist thinker Thaynath Han, he is full of these ideas of transition, emergence, that the person who dies is not really dead. I'm not a Buddhist or even an expert on Buddhism, but I can get the point. You know, somebody dies, they're buried here, something goes up, it condenses, rain comes. And his message was, the person is not ever really gone. But you have the wrong idea of the person. You have to see that this happens. So, in many fields, the boundary between humans and non-humans has become blurred. And I think the reasons are legitimate. Not everything about us is unique. We have appetites, animals have appetites, we move, gravity pulls us, gravity pulls planets. So you can see how this logic can go very far, but I want to extend it to one particular area for about 5 or 7 minutes, and then I'll go into my last section. And this is anchored in my experience in Germany, where I've been for 8 years, but I've had some links also for 8 or 10 years before that. As you know, especially in this project, it's a great museum city. A lot of very excellent critics of art, curators, museologists. I won't say funders, because the funders are the state, by and large, the German state. But there are certainly collectors, connoisseurs, etc., who are not in the state sphere. The state is a very big player. The reason that's important, and it's connected to this issue that human beings and objects are not tightly segregated, and that it's not useful to think of us as in charge and telling them where to go and positioning these chairs and putting the artworks where they are and so on. Yes, on the face of it, yes. But when they, certain things happen to them, for example, they decay or it's not us. We are not orchestrating that. Who is orchestrating? Something is orchestrating that, and the picture or painting or sculpture is responding because it's also living, the materials are living. We know all this. But it's now become a bigger principle. And in the case of Germany, what I found was this was the time when I came there, this very important Humboldt Museum project was starting. And it created turbulence throughout the German artistic and critical world because it involved bringing a lot of museums suddenly forcibly under one big roof. It was funded at a remarkable level for that time, 600 million euros, something like that, very, very big. Its early beginnings were 2004. It's still going. It's not that visible what it does and all. So there's a kind of question in the German public here, exactly what are they doing? Why all this money? Where's the value added? Ethnographic museums are being shunted to the center where they are. There's that. Nobody quite knows. I bring this up because the time I came to Germany, more or less, was the time of the great recent wave of migrants from the Arab and African worlds to Europe and to Germany in particular. Angela Merkel famously said, welcome them. Now that's become a huge point of controversy, and there was always a controversy about that. So what I want to say is Europe has some very big issues about museums, objects, repatriation, but it also has a huge set of issues about migration. What about the Turks? What about the Syrians? Which Arabs? Big problems. I said these are not unconnected problems, but actually both objects have human dimensions and humans are objectified. So you cannot have a separate policy about migration, who will come, who will not come, etc., and a completely separate department for the objects, which are ours, which are others. And furthermore, what I said in public in various presentations, and I've also written a little bit, is that there are narratives about both which are interconnected. Which movement is accidental, which movement is deliberate, who wants to say, and you might say in humanities terms, what stories are objects telling and what stories are the human migrants telling and where do they connect? So my reason for making this extended argument was, first of all, humans and objects are not so far apart. But secondly, when you take the migration crisis and the objects crisis, who's in the museum, which object should come under what roof, why should they be displayed, who is the public, etc., that we need, let's say in Germany. But I think the question could be asked more generally, what is the connection between a movement of objects which then come to rest temporarily? Because you never know what will happen in 50 years, 100 years in a particular museum, like this one, or like a Humboldt Forum, or very small ones, or much bigger ones, and with the people. People who are coming, people who are going, people are flying out, people are being screened, we like this, we like that, you must go back, you can never go back, etc., etc. So what I said is, let us connect these discussions and have not an identical framework, but some dialogue between the whole migration debate, which in social sciences is a whole industry of its own, focused entirely on legal, illegal, today's, tomorrow's, first generation, eighth generation, and then the objects discussion, just totally in a different space, restitution, repatriation, ownership, control, display. So I said, look, the truth is, objects too have stories to tell. Humans we know have stories to tell, even if you're not listening. We know a migrant who arrives from Syria in Berlin via Slovenia has a huge story to tell, and there are 1,000 stories like this. Objects we less think of as having stories in that rich sense, and even provenience research is a bit specific. But the bigger question, what is this thing telling us? Any one of the objects, let's say in the ancient gallery or any gallery, in any museum anyway, you could say, what is the story? So I want to just let you know, not so much about this particular set of debates in Germany, but to say they have an overall relevance. A policy towards humans, whom we also try to fix So I don't have to do anything except allude to what is happening on all our borders, Aadhaar card, this, that. It means I need to know where you are. So Berlin has something called the Bürgeramt, little office, a city ID. To get that, you need 100 documents to show where you are in Berlin, where are you saying. It goes back to Ottoman, Habsburg rule, etc. It's a kind of locational thing. And if you move, you're supposed to tell the city again. This is not about the state and passport and all. It's a city level. It's a curious thing. But we have a counterpart for it here in Aadhaar and now the heavily interlinked income tax, this thing, everything together. And if in a case like mine, I don't have an Indian mobile phone, that means the whole dowry falls with it. I cannot get mobile, so I cannot get IT. I cannot get IT, so I don't have this. There's a way, surely, to negotiate that, but it looks to me very interconnected, just like Germany. One thing leads to another thing leads to another. And it's all there to place me. It's not to tell me go anywhere you like, do anything you like. That is not the point. Not just in India, but anywhere. So, I say that in narrative terms, the human beings are, you might say, like characters in search of a plot. Players in a story without a resolution. That is true of citizenship, but with objects, which is what I want to come to, because the human story has to do with nation, state, boundaries, fixing identities, another story. But with objects, I want to come to my concluding thoughts. And here I have another angle which comes from others. So I'm borrowing this idea in some way. And it's related, I believe, to the collection here that we are celebrating, discussing in this ancient gallery. And its objective to open up new perspectives, which I fully endorse. I want to bring an angle onto that based into this human-object blur, that they are not sharply different. There is a small body of literature that now asks seriously the question about visual images, but also about objects in general, which is what do they want? Not what do I want from them, or what is my interpretation doing to them, but what do they want? Now, on the face of it, this looks like a slightly, abstract or even stupid question. But if you see that the objects are not sharply distinct from humans, that they have gravity, they have some momentum which has been stilled, they have biographies that have been brought to a halt momentarily, there's a lot of reason to ask the question, what do they want? And the key author here is an old friend and colleague at the University of Chicago, W.J.T. Mitchell, Tom Mitchell, who wrote something on what pictures want, what do pictures want, etc. Brilliant work. And now many other people are asking this type of question. And what I would say is the following, that by asking this question, we try to put some distance between us in any given period and the object. The object has been seen for a long time. It has been viewed by many people, plus it has been interpreted by many people. So it is itself a kind of palimpsest of interpretations which gives it the sense that it also wants something. To be seen less, to be seen more. You can ask about the famous Mona Lisa smile. What is that about? Has that got anything to do with Mona Lisa? Is it just some external view? She's smiling, she's not smiling. That is a clear case of she is seeking to say something, but who can give a guarantee as to what? So placing, this is Tom Mitchell's idea, that object in its history, where was it collected, how was it viewed, etc., recognizes that it can demand something of us, which is not just a ventriloquial reflection of what we're asking it. So I'm a modernist, I see some blotch, it asks about that. No, it's reflecting some more complexity into which I have to intervene as a viewer, curator, audience today. So this perspective, I would say, I can say more about it, but he calls it a geological perspective. That we see the object as having a long history and try to get the layerings, because the layerings somehow are in the vivified demand of that object for something. So we can't do anything. So if I say to you, that is a piece from Ajanta, but let's treat it as a Picasso painting. Right? You can't, because it demands that it is what it is. There are limits, of course, but you can't just do anything. Otherwise, why not just say it's an open space, some kind of minimalist art, it's an open canvas, let's call it something. No, you can't call it something because it has a material quality, it has a life, it has a history, it has a geology. All of those constrain. We can still have quarrels over interpretation within a narrow zone. And then they will affect the next generation of viewers, curators, and so on. And those things will come back through the object to us. So that is the sense in which objects, including the great art objects of our museum here, have wishes. So here, how do you ask what do the objects in the ancient world's gallery of the CSMVS want? Let's say we ask that question. Right here, what do they want? What are they demanding of us? One answer to this question, you could say, is that they are asking us to tell their stories as refugees, migrants, and expatriates who have arrived here through complex journeys of discovery, transportation, collection, conquest, curation. And here I want to quote from, I don't know who is the author, you will all know, in the museum, of this note from the Ancient Worlds exhibition. So I'm just reading from an internal text to concretize this idea. The objects want something. It says, by presenting sculptures and describing their context, the exhibition will respond to such questions. Were there any connections between India and the ancient Mediterranean? Why were most Greek sculptures depicted in the nude? Why did the Greeks and Romans give so much importance to a trained and perfected body? Was Egyptian philosophy only about death and the afterlife? How were Egyptians worshipped? How were Egyptian gods worshipped? Why did ancient cultures often give animal forms to their sacred sculpture? What were the different ideals of beauty in different ancient cultures? What was the Indian philosophy behind sculpting the divine? How did geography impact the early cultures and shape their beliefs? And then there is a small sentence about the objects from the partner museums, National Museum, Delhi, Bihar Museum, Patna, etc., which are on display for 10 months, enabling a wider and deeper educational engagement. In our strong, interconnected digital world, this I'm still reading, where geographic and political boundaries are seemingly blurring the Indian public, a majority of whom are under 25. Key point, are consuming ideas and histories from the far corners of the world, often forming impressions through popular media, digital images, video content, and text. Through this exhibition, we want publics to see and engage with historic objects of art to gain a deeper understanding of our shared ancient past. So this is the end of the quote. Now I return to my own voice to say I agree with all the sentiments in this statement. This is anything and everything any anthropologist would want to do or achieve with this kind of collection. But I would add one thing, only from the angle I am taking. So it's not a subtraction, it's bringing one more passenger. And as you know, in the Indian trains, we always adjust. Even our family comes to a fully packed compartment, we adjust. So I hope you will adjust. So I would add one layer to this project, which is to connect the lessons we can learn from these objects to their flow as loans, gifts, or repatriated objects from museum to museum. So that's the beauty of this show. In the modern world. So the ancient object in the modern world. Let us add these flows, interpretations, and cultural exchanges to the original cultural and cosmological values embodied in these objects. Museums like this great one are, I would say, the gateway between ancient cosmologies and modern audiences. That clearly underlies the spirit of everything I read and what's being done. That story of collecting, curation, collaboration, and exchange is a crucial part of what these objects want to tell us. It's not we want to tell them. So let us close the gap between ancient cosmologies and modern pedagogical spaces such as this museum. And I know that's already going on in many ways, so I'm just adding another piece to that. Their mutual reinforcement, I think, is the real story of the social life of things, especially the extraordinary things like those in the Ancient Worlds Gallery of this great museum. So I stop there. Thank you very much. I hope I've not exceeded my time.